Martinez Paz to my right, and we are breaking down another week of NFL action for the Steelers and Eagles. Already through 4 weeks, a quarter of the way. Well, actually, now with the 18-week season, it's actually not quite a full quarter, but whatever. You get the gist. We're cruising along through the NFL season, and we're breaking it down. The Eagles with yet another win, continuing to be this dominant, the only undefeated team left, and the Steelers finding another way to lose, this time in a devastating fashion, as they had victory in their hands in the fourth quarter. But we'll get into both of those games. Ricardo, how are you doing today? It's I guess it's not the nicest day out. I was about to say it's a beautiful day, but hey, I guess it's a nice day for us. We're talking Steelers and Eagles. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, man. Can't complain when we're talking Steelers, unless you're because you're the Steelers lost. But I can't complain, I guess, as an Eagles fan.
The Steelers lost, but hey, I'll say this. I'll preface it by saying this. I was at the game, drove out for my first game at Heinz Field, Acrisure Stadium, whatever you want to call it. My first game in that building. It was pretty awesome. And now I can say, I was at the first game of Kenny Pickett's career. And when he's inducted into Canton, Ohio, I'll be telling stories to my kids 20 years from now. Like, oh, yeah, I was there at Acrisure Stadium. Well, actually, I guess, 20 years from now, I think even if I had kids 20 years from now, they'd still be pretty young to be telling stories. But I don't know how all that's going to line up. Either way, when he's getting inducted into Canton, I'll be telling everybody, hey, remember, his first game at Acrisure Stadium, first throw was interception intended for Chase Claypool. He probably should have come up with the catch. I'll never forget that. And it was cool to be at his first game, at least, even though the Steelers lost. There's a lot we have to get into with the Steelers. So
yes,
I don't know. Don't want to take up any more time kind of lamenting that. And we'll certainly be talking about Kenny Pickett here. So do we want to start with the losers again? Should we start with the Steelers this week?
If you want to, yeah, I'm cool with that.
All right, let's start with the Steelers,
okay,
because they were the losers, and to the victors go the spoils. So we'll save the better for last. Yeah, this game. This game was tough. The real point when I thought things were switching and that the momentum the momentum did completely shift was in that the end of that first half when Zach Wilson had the ball. They were driving down the field. The Jets were already up. I guess they were up 7 at this point. It was 10-3. And Zach Wilson threw that awful interception. The worst interception that any quarterback threw on the day of the 3 that played, in my opinion. The Steelers come back, and they're able to get into field goal range thanks to the roughing the passer call. Get the field goal. And at that point, I thought all the momentum shifted to the Steelers to get points at the half when they really had no business getting an additional 3 points there. Chris Boswell, kudos to him, knocking through the longest kick in the history of that building, Acrisure Stadium. And at that point, the Steelers come out, get a quick 3-and-out on the Jets, and everything is leaning towards the Steelers. And then, if that's not enough, Kenny Pickett comes in the game. And the building, that was the loudest point. That was louder than when they played Renegade in the fourth quarter. It was louder. That was the loudest point when he came in. The ovations were insane for him. And he came in, and it was a mixed performance. It was a mixed performance here. I'll say this. It was a mixed performance from the standpoint of when you look at the stat sheet, first and foremost, 120 yards, 10 for 13, 3 interceptions, 2 rushing touchdowns, and a 65.1 QB rating. I got to say, though, I thought he played good, and I think the main thing that you see with him was he added a different dynamic to this offense that we haven't seen with Mitch Trubisky all season long. And I think that's the difference of why the Steelers need to continue to roll forward with this guy. He's done things and he's led this offense in ways that we haven't seen yet to this season, and that Mitch Trubisky, frankly, just can't do.
Yeah, we already saw the reports that going forward it's going to be Kenny Pickett going. But I need to ask you this: did you expect him to come out of halftime?
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. And I was with a family. I was with a family friend that I drove out with. And he actually asked me, maybe it was halfway through the second quarter. He said, is there any chance Kenny Pickett gets in this game today? And I said, if Mitch Trubisky gets hurt, that was the only way I really saw it. And I basically, and here's the reason that I thought it. Because now that you've exposed Kenny Pickett, you've put him out on the field for everyone to see, and he's clearly the better player than Mitch Trubisky, you can't go back to him at this point. And that's what I said in my takeaway on our Instagram page, is now that you've exposed Kenny Pickett. You can't make the change back. And, frankly, for as good as Pickett looked, I don't know if he's ready for this next set of 4 games that he's about to get thrown into to start his NFL career. In Buffalo, then you've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, then you've got the Miami Dolphins, and then the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, those are 4 really talented teams that you're now throwing this kid into in his first NFL game action. I mean, I get the old adage, sink or swim. There's a reason that they drafted him in the first round, everything that goes into it. But, you don't want to ruin him these next couple weeks because he's going up, against some of these. So that's why I said after the bye week was the time to put him in. Clearly, that's not the case anymore, and it sounds like they're sticking forward with him. But no, to answer your question, I did not expect him to come in. I expected them to kind of roll with Mitchell Trubisky at this point. But, I mean, it's clear. Do you disagree from what we saw on the field? Whether he's a rookie or not, he's a better quarterback than Mitch Trubisky, and he put the Steelers in a better position to win in the 30 minutes that he played than the Steelers have been in the 3.5 games that they've had Mitch Trubisky at the helm.
Yeah, no, he definitely looked a lot better than Trubisky did. I mean, I don't know. There was a little spark with him. It just seemed like the offense was a bit more, I don't know, like efficient, moving the ball down the field a bit more, like easier than Trubisky for some reason, who for some reason struggled with, even with all the talent around him. Like it made sense, I would say. Yeah.
And that's exactly it. And I don't know the perfect word to kind of describe it, but when he was on the field, the offense was more dynamic. I think it's as simple as that. He added a different level of it's a different level of something. He brought them up to like this elevated playing. Just as a unit, they were better. The offense was purely better, and they operated better. And like you said, they were moving the ball with him. He was getting out on the run. He was making throws. He was putting the ball in positions for his receivers to make plays. I'm going to talk about George Pickens a little bit later, but he made some contested catches that really helped him out. And the offense, I guess I'll say it now. The offensive line, I thought, when it came to running the ball, did really well. This was the best game that the Steelers had from their rushing attack this season. Najee Harris had his season high in yards at 74, 18 carries on the day. So, I mean, I thought the offensive line did pretty well. And I'll tell you the big difference for me, the thing that I hang my hat on with Kenny Pickett as to why he is the better option starting quarterback was to start the fourth quarter. The Steelers were up at this point by 3 points. They were marching down the field. They were inside the 20, and he literally had a second and a half to throw. Jets rusher came right up the middle, basically unblocked, delivered a big hit on him, but Kenny Pickett stuck in the pocket, stepped up, and delivered a strike 12 yards downfield to Pat Freiermuth to put them inside the 5-yard line, and then Kenny Pickett on the next play ran it in. That throw to Pat Freiermuth, hanging in the pocket, dealing with the contact, and delivering a strike for the first down there, that is a throw that Mitch Trubisky has not made all season, and that's the difference right there. That's why I say, even if we're going to get some rookie struggles from Kenny Pickett these next couple weeks, even if Kenny Pickett's going to make some bad interceptions like he did on his second interception, I know it was in Pat Freiermuth's hands, but still, you were throwing it into double, triple coverage there off of your back foot. At that point, it would have been better with the lead to just take the sack and let the time run out, or just completely, hail that thing out of bounds. Don't try and go for the completion there. You're going to get those mistakes, but the Steelers have a better chance to win football games when he is at quarterback. I think it's as simple as that. So even if Kenny Pickett isn't ready for it, even if this is going to be a tough test for him these next 4 games, he's the guy that's got to be in there because I think the Steelers have a better chance to win with him there.
Yeah, they definitely do. I mean, they put up more points than Trubisky did in one half. I mean, it's a small sample size, but I agree with you. He's going to help this offense put up more points and be a bit more efficient, maybe take some of that pressure off of Matt Canada a bit, because I mean he's been facing a lot of heat recently. But I think this is, I mean, I was watching the game with the Jets fan Mike, and he was like, him and then a couple other my housemates were like, oh, Pickett's got to come in. This offense looks horrible right now, and it was like, no, man, I don't think it's gonna happen. And then all of a sudden it happens, and we're just like, all right, it's your team now, Kenny. Like, oh, we're riding with you now, I guess.
Yeah, and I was wondering when he came in, the stadium just got so loud, and I was like, what's happening here? We didn't we got the punt. We're back on the field. What's everybody? And then I'm like looking around, and I see on the field, and I'm like, holy, what? And Kenny Pickett's on the field there, but I mean, yeah, I mean. I feel like it's as simple as that. As the offense is more dynamic, we're both kind of in agreement there. And I mean,
Yeah.
it sucks for Mitch Trubisky, but it is what it is at this point. And now I think if you're the Steelers, now I think you really look to try and move Mason Rudolph. And this is kind of a
Yeah.
sidebar to it. But if Mitch Trubisky is now going to go to be your backup, there's really no reason to have Mason Rudolph on this roster whatsoever.
Yeah.
Mason Rudolph was really just an emergency option if Trubisky got hurt and Kenny Pickett wasn't ready. Now at this point, Kenny Pickett's your starter. Mitch Trubisky's your backup. Get whatever you can for Mason Rudolph at this point because he's got no future with the organization. So
Yeah.
that's a sidebar, but just something to kind of touch on real quick. Now, another point, I talked about the offensive line. I'm not going to praise them too much, but I do have to make the point they've been better this season than I thought they were. When we were getting through some of those games in the preseason, I thought they were going to be costing the Steelers team games. They haven't to this point. They've been, they've been getting progressively better. They didn't do too well in pass protection today. Well, not today, on Sunday. 3 sacks, but again, this kind of goes against Trubisky. I mean, all 3 of those sacks were throws that were plays that he, just they were bad sacks, frankly, just kind of holding still, not being able to scramble and
Yeah.
and not being able to just kind of deliver a strike, even though the hit's coming, and just not being able to pull the trigger and make decisions. So I don't want to blame the offensive line too much, but especially in the run game, I thought they did well. So I want to give them credit. They've continually got better, and Mason Cole, Kevin Dotson, and James Daniels, the 3 interior linemen, have all started to gel pretty well. So I like what I've seen from them progression-wise to where they've kind of gotten to this point. The one other thing I have to say, and I have to rip this defense a little bit. This defense, I love so many players on that side of the ball, but the reason that the Steelers lost this game wasn't because Kenny Pickett threw 3 interceptions. It wasn't because Pat Freiermuth dropped that ball and the Jets were able to come up with the turnover late in the game. It wasn't for any of these reasons other than, frankly, the Jets offense beat the Steelers defense in the 4th quarter. It's as simple as that. Where this took place was the Jets got the ball back in the 4th quarter with about 13 minutes left in the game. The Steelers crowd was buzzing because they were playing Renegade right as that drive was beginning. On this drive, the Jets converted a 3rd and 6 for 35 yards. They converted a 4th and 7 for 17 yards. They had a bad incompletion down in the red zone. They came back on 3rd and goal, 5 yards out, and scored a touchdown. On that drive, they made every play they had to make to pick up conversions, to move the ball downfield. Kudos to Zach Wilson to be able to lead the offense. But the Steelers, they let up the touchdown there. Then you come back. That's when the interception happened that Pickett threw, intended for Pat Freiermuth. And the Jets on that drive come back. They convert a 3rd and 6 for 8 yards. They convert a 2nd and 9 with 1:44 to go for 17 yards to get inside the red zone. And then 2nd and 5 with 50 seconds left inside the 10. This was kind of the turning point to me. 2nd and 5, 50 seconds to go. Inside the 10-yard line, and the Steelers converted. It was a run for 1 yard. You would have had 3rd and 4 from the 4-yard line, 3rd and goal. And the Steelers committed a defensive holding penalty. That was the point. That was the point right there where I was like, this game is lost. Up until that point, I said, there's no way the Jets scored 2 drives in the 4th quarter against this defense, 2 touchdowns to take the lead. I said at the very least, one of those drives, the defense will bend but won't break. It didn't happen. On both of them, the Jets were able to punch it in. And that's not good enough. If this defense, which came into the season saying this defense was going to have to be key to winning some of these games, that's a game right there that this defense has to win. It's as simple as that, and they didn't do it. They got beat by the Jets.
Yeah, I put that in my takeaways too. I mean, it was the defense that ultimately let the Steelers down. And it's really, I mean, it's not like the Jets offense is anything special either. Zach Wilson coming back from his injury he was out for the first 3 weeks of the season since getting injured in that Eagles preseason game of the first week. So I thought there was going to be rust with him, but I don't know.
There was. I do think there was rust. I think there was rust through the first. He made some good throws in the first half, but I think really it was up until the 4th quarter we saw some of the rust come in. He missed a really bad throw. I don't remember what point in the game it was, but I feel like there was a really bad throw in the 3rd quarter that he missed. But it's the fact that he made the plays when it counted.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's Yeah, credit to him, I guess. But I mean, he's not. I mean,
Still, the
I didn't
Steelers
expect him to
defense
be.
has to win that game,
Yeah,
like
like
you were
the
saying.
Steelers defense should. Yeah, that's in theory. They have playmakers. Sure, they're without T.J. Watt for. I mean, that's been for a while now, so that's not an excuse anymore. I mean,
It's never been an excuse.
it's
And
yeah,
you know what? That's what the Steelers are 0-7 in games TJ Watt hasn't played since he was drafted. But I mean that can't be an excuse. That has to be a demerit on everybody else on that defense that nobody is stepping up in the ways they need to win football games.
yeah. That's very true. Yeah.
And they've gotten away with it the last couple weeks because of how bad the Steelers offense has been. They got exposed this week because they cost the Steelers the win.
Yes, that is true. I would have to agree with that. Yeah.
And you know what? And I want to run this stat by you and get what and see what your thoughts are on this as well.
Yeah.
This was by Alex Kozora, who really finds all these incredible stats about the Steelers, and he's a good follow on Twitter for anybody who's on that social media platform. But the Steelers pass rush in the first 3 quarters pressured Zach Wilson 47.8% of the time. In the fourth quarter, they pressured him just 16.7% of the time. That's the difference right there. I mean that's a reason why if you can't get home and you can't get pressure on the quarterback, especially in the fourth quarter, that's where. And don't give me that it was fatigue this week either, because the Steelers
Yeah.
led in time of possession this week. They ran more offensive plays than the Jets. The Steelers defense flat out got beat. And I'm going to call out Cam Hayward a little bit because in his 3 games, again from Alex Kozora, in his 3 games without TJ Watt, 1 tackle for loss, 0 sacks, and 0 QB hits. Look, I get that he's getting cued in on more by the offensive line, but that's not good enough. And your big time players are supposed to step up when you need them to. And this was a point with TJ Watt down. He's supposed to step up, and he absolutely hasn't at this point.
Yeah. I mean, also consider the fact that the Jets' offensive line is just so like injured. So like they're back to their like what 4th left tackle, or I don't know, like the number of like lineups they've had up there at the front 5. Oh my goodness, like that should be even more of a reason that they should have, put more pressure and I mean, I guess save the game essentially, but they didn't do that. So
they were down to their 5th tackle halfway through the game. Max Mitchell got hurt in the second quarter.
Yep.
And they put in Connor McDermott.
Yeah.
And that Mekhi Becton, Dwayne Brown, George Fant, Max Mitchell. They were literally down to their 5th offensive tackle. They had to move Elijah Vera Tucker over to left tackle, who's their guard, because of how bad the injury bug has pressured them. And the Steelers weren't able to get pressure on him in the fourth quarter. With McDermott lined up outside, you weren't able to get pressure on him. That's not good enough. It's not good enough. And you can't expect to win games going forward. And, honestly, you're not going to find in these next 4 weeks going up against Buffalo, against the Bucks, against the Dolphins, against the Eagles, you're not going to find a worse offensive line out of those 4 teams going forward than you did this last week against the Jets. So it's not going to get better. And this is going to be a rough situation here going forward for the Steelers. I don't have much more to say on this game. We'll get into in the second half of the show. We'll get into a preview for week 5 here. Just a couple other notes. I know the Eagles will get into their injury bug, but the Steelers also had quite a few players that had to deal with injuries. Cam Sutton's dealing with a hamstring. Minka Fitzpatrick dealing with an ankle. Hayward dealing with an elbow and an ankle. He got hurt in the second quarter, came back in and played the rest of the game. And then Terrell Edmonds also in the concussion protocol. Yep. And my player of the game was George Pickens. Real quick, just to touch on him. He had kind of his first big breakout game, 6 catches over 100 yards, and really was kind of a steady force for whichever quarterback was in the game. Made a lot of contested catches to extend drives, which was huge. So a lot of kudos goes to him for being such a big factor in this game and a big reason why the Steelers were able to find offensive success along with Kenny Pickett coming into the game. So he was my player of the game.
Yeah, I'm glad he was more involved. I mean, the other thing I took away is just how little Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson, how a small a factor they played in this game. I mean, they didn't really do much. 2 catches.
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't. Yeah. Claypool, I actually don't think registered a single yard of offense.
Did not.
And Deontay Johnson, outside of his, I think he had 1 catch and 2 rushes. I think he rushed for 11 yards. I'm not sure how long his 1 catch was, but it's just, and I can't go crazy about it because still I think the offense was effective. And when you have that many playmakers, not everyone's going to be, putting up big stats. And obviously, Najee Harris got 18 carries, and
Right.
the offense was really able to run the ball well. So again, it's not concerning to me at this point, but it is a little bit aggravating, especially because Claypool on that interception that Kenny Pickett had the first one of his career. I went back and watched that replay 4 or 5 times. He
He
should have
should
come down with that
have.
ball. To be frank, he should have come down with that ball,
Yeah.
especially because contested catches are supposed to be one of his strong suits. And the ball was actually put in a perfect position for him to make the play, and he didn't. So that
Yeah.
was aggravating. But yeah, something to monitor going forward because, especially for Claypool, because of the big stats that he put, the big expectations he put for himself at the start of the season. But yeah, that's a good point that you brought that up there. So thank you for commenting on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's talk. Let's get some positivity going, bro. Let's change gears here.
Okay. So yeah, the Eagles now are the only undefeated team in the league, with the Miami Dolphins losing to the Cincinnati Bengals, of course, your division rivals. But yeah, so 4-0. This was a much uglier game. I mean, weather conditions certainly didn't help. It was rainy. I mean, the entire game, the field was soaking wet. I mean, you could just see like the towels were out trying to wipe, players trying to wipe their hands and like all and the ball and stuff. Like it was just, that's not an excuse necessarily. I'm just saying it didn't help at all. But first takeaway, really, defense came through again. It's I'm like running out of things to like say at this point because like yeah, on paper we knew that this team had playmakers, but it's just like for me it seems like every week it's someone else, which I'll sort of get into a little bit later. Hassan Reddick obviously had the biggest impact with 2 forced fumbles, 5 forced overall from the Eagles defense. Both of them were strip sacks. Trevor Lawrence, I mean, couldn't hold the ball for the life of him this game, but yeah, the first forced fumble was on a scoring drive that was, I believe, it was definitely going to lead to points. They could have at least kicked a field goal, and then the other one was to end the game. So Hassan Reddick has really been stepping up. He had 1.5 sacks last week against Washington, and now 2 this week, and a tackle for a loss as well. So really, it's man. I'm also, I need to say, James Bradbury with a massive red zone interception.
Oh yeah, that was huge.
That was an all-out blitz from Jonathan Gannon, and Trevor Lawrence just kind of chucked it up. James Bradbury, I give him credit for coming off of his receiver and jumping that route. My goodness, that was one hell of a play. Watching that was like, gee, I didn't even realize how impressive that was. But yeah, so those 2 players. Really
one thing I want to comment on, because of how you've said it's been kind of like a rotating, and we'll get into this with the offense too, but it's been kind of rotating for the defense. Everybody stepping up. Obviously the Lions game, they let up a lot of points, but since then, every week it's been different guys stepping up and being the playmakers. And I think that's such a good sign because it shows you when you have guys all over your defense that can make plays and that can step up, and you don't have to rely on the same guys, kind of like the Steelers, how they're too reliant on TJ Watt. When it comes to their defense, the Eagles are the opposite in that they can rely on so many different guys to make plays and be kind of the driving force of the defense. That's a sign to me of a really good football team, and I think that is that's exactly the case here with the Eagles of just how effective they've been having different guys making plays, and I think it shows with their undefeated record to this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the rundown. I mean, week 1 against the Lions is James Bradbury with a pick 6. The week 2, it was Darius Slay who locked up Justin Jefferson, played the game of his life. Week 3, last week against Washington, it was Brandon Graham with 2.5 sacks. I mean, the entire defensive line, really. And then this week was Hassan Reddick. So yeah, it's definitely very encouraging. I mean, it seems like Jonathan Gannon is finally finding how to best use his players. I mean, obviously, we all knew Hassan Reddick was better as a pass rusher as opposed to dropping coverage, but that's a whole different conversation.
Do you think this defense is finally kind of meshing together with Jonathan Gannon's scheme? Like what do you think has been the big reason why they've been what's been the main reason why they've been so effective? Has it been scheme? Has it been them meshing together, or has it just been the talent showing itself?
I think that's interesting. I know they've been playing more man coverage than they did last year. I mean, that sort of goes to the strong suit of James Bradbury and Darius Slay. So in that regard, it's working in the secondary, and I guess yeah, just the talent is showing up. I mean, they're starting to mesh together, even though there are a few injuries. I mean, there were a few plays against the Jaguars where they had a couple blown coverages. That was just, I mean, miscommunication, and I guess because Josiah Scott was playing in there for Avonte Maddox. I mean, still, that's not an excuse necessarily, but I think, yeah, they're buying into what Jonathan Gannon is bringing to this defense, and it's just starting to show now, especially with most of these players having already been in the system for a year. And then this being their second, so that's definitely a factor in why they're playing so much better than last season, I would say. And then yeah, it was the seventh best offense. The Jaguars only produced 148 pass yards, 71 rush yards, and like I said, 5 turnovers, 4 fumbles and a pick. Yeah, I mean that the defense just really came through for the Eagles.
And it's also the fact, you know what else it is too, is it's the fact that the Eagles faced such early adversity when they had the pick six, the Jaguars then score the TD to go up 14. You're in the rain, you're in these crappy conditions. You're not sure how that's going to factor into it. Maybe the emotion of going up against Doug Peterson starts to become a factor. So all these things where the Eagles are maybe facing their first real major adversity, and they answered it. They also failed that fourth down conversion at the end of the first quarter.
Yep.
And, and a lot of that credit has to go to their defense, because when your offense is struggling a little bit to start the game like they did, and you're down early, you're in kind of a spot that you're not used to. The team responded as a whole. The defense responded and made plays. And overall, this Eagles team has to have a lot of credit for handling the different adverse conditions that went into this game. And they were able to 29 unanswered points after the Jaguars went up 14-0. So
yeah,
I think a lot of credit has to go with how the Eagles kind of handled themselves and how they were able to still pull out this win.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good transition going into my second takeaway. Really, it was the rushing attack that carried this offense. I mean, like you said, adverse, effects and all that stuff, and the rain being a big factor. And so they turned to the run game. And what did that do? I mean, they rushed the ball 50 times for 210 yards on 4.2 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. I mean, running back Miles Sanders had his best game, 27 runs, 134 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, that's what you love to see out of Miles Sanders. That's the kind of play we saw his rookie year that he hasn't replicated really the last 2 seasons. And then this just sort of reminds you Miles Sanders is like on a good day can be really good. And I mean, it definitely helped that the field was a bit wet and all, but credit to the offensive line who lost 2 players during the game. Jordan Mailata early on after the pick six, trying to make a tackle on whoever it was. I forgot his name. Anthony Cisco or something like that. And then Isaac Seumalo, who also went down later on in the game. I believe it was in the third quarter to an ankle injury. So it was Jack Driscoll who replaced Mailata, and I'm forgetting. Sua Opeta, a guard. I mean, the credit goes to Jeff Stoutland there. I mean, and just for the unit overall for being it's like they didn't miss a beat essentially.
Well, I think I agree with you. Credit has to go to Stoutland, but also this is something that we talked about at the start of the season. Credit has to go to Howie Roseman too for building up not only the best offensive line in football with a starting unit, but depth at every single spot along that offensive line. And when you do have injuries like this pop up with Semealu or Jordan Mailata, it doesn't look like it's going to be long-term stuff. And even with Andre Dillard, your backup left tackle out, the fact that you have this depth on the offensive line, Jack Driscoll steps in and without missing a beat is able to help and contribute to this offensive line having such a big day on the ground. I even wrote it down here. There was a play. What was the play that I wrote down here? There was a play. I don't remember what point it was. Oh, man. It was such a good play. The Eagles had a 4th and 1, but it was a long 4th and 1. And I think they were down inside Jaguars territory. Yeah. And they got the push for the first down. And I was like, they completely manhandled that defensive line with the backups in there, like you said. And I think it's the fact, too. I came into this game expecting it to be like Jalen Hurts is going to have to really show out again because there's so many talented young players on this
Yeah.
Jaguars defense, specifically the defensive line, and the Eagles offensive line just took it to them. And you just talked about like how well Miles Sanders did and the amount of rushing yards total that this Eagles offense put up. It's really impressive, and I think it just shows you, the offensive line. You saw how much of a strength it is for the Eagles in this game,
Yeah.
and you saw that this Eagles team is just so well built this year. And anybody who thinks that this may be a little bit fluky at this point, or this Eagles team really isn't that good, I mean, I'm all in on the Eagles at this point. They are so legit, and that undefeated record so far is very telling of how talented they are.
Yeah, I mean, having to overcome that 14-point deficit, I remember once the Jaguars scored again, was like, I wasn't worried necessarily. I was more just like annoyed that they were down in like a 14-0 hole. Last season, I would not have felt the same. Last season, I would have said, "Oh, well, this game's probably over." I mean, Jalen Hurts. At that point, I didn't trust him to bring them back into the game. But this season, this game specifically, I was like, I feel a bit more confident as an Eagles fan watching Jalen Hurts in this offense. I know that they were struggling early, but I was like, no, Jalen Hurts and this offense is not going to let up. They are not giving up. They're going to fight for every yard, for everything. That's just the vibe you get with this team. Just so much more confident, much more poised, much more mature. I don't know. It's just this feeling. It almost reminds me of the Super Bowl run they had in 2017. I mean, I can't remember. Yeah,
Hey,
like
man,
that was the last time I felt this good.
It's not totally outlandish at this point because of how good they've looked to this point in the season. And honestly, if I ask you, like, what's the weakness on this Eagles team that's going to hold them back? Do you have an answer? What's the weakness that's going to hold them back?
I mean, the only thing
We said
right
it was
now.
we said it was Jalen Hurts at the start of the year.
Yeah.
And so far, he's answered the doubters. So far, he's looked incredible. Even in a game yesterday where he doesn't have this crazy performance, the fact that he can still manage the game to a certain extent and not do anything that cost the Eagles is so clear. So I don't know. You tell me what's the big concern? What's the thing that's going to keep them from being a legitimate Super Bowl contender?
Injuries. I mean, that's the only thing at this point I see. I mean, the laundry list is already long as is. I mean, I could sort of touch on that right now.
Yeah, why don't we get into it? This was your takeaway.
The last
takeaway.
takeaway.
There was some big names that are now that went down in this game. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, the Eagles were already without Avonte Maddox and Boston Scott in this game. They elevated, I think, Josiah Scott and Trey Sermon from the practice squad. One of those two. I know Trey Sermon was. But yeah, during the game, the Eagles lost Darius Slay, Mailata, as I mentioned before, Patrick Johnson. I mean, two other linebackers, Patrick and Kyron Johnson, both to head injuries. Devontae Smith came out of the game for a little bit, but then he went back in. He was the only player to return. Seumalo also did not return. And yeah, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 players that, I mean, they're not long-term injuries. According to the reports, but still.
I even read something this morning that Gannon said it's possible all these guys play this week.
Yeah, I was going to say they could all play this week against Arizona, but I mean, that's really the only thing I can point out right now where maybe the Eagles don't make the Super Bowl because of injuries. But then you think back to 2017.
But every team deals with injuries.
And yeah, that too. Like 2017, the Eagles had an outrageous amount of people on IR and still won the Super Bowl. I mean, it's not an excuse. I'm not saying that it is, but it just makes it harder. It makes it more difficult.
You can't afford, like, if someone like Darius Slay were to go down for the year or something like that. That's, knock on wood, hopefully he doesn't.
Yeah.
That's there's certain guys that you can't really afford to live without. And there's certain positions where obviously the Eagles have better depth and you'd feel more comfortable. We talked about this when Derek Barnett went down for the year. Like, yeah, it sucks. He's a good player. You want him on your defense, but like you're built there to sustain that type of injury. Like, you still have Josh Sweat. You still have Hassan Reddick. You still have Brandon Graham, who's reemerged, to be a force again. So it's like it all depends on but again, it's like a lot of these positions you can go through and be like, you know what, the Eagles have depth there that they can sustain it. If Jordan Mailata misses a couple weeks, like, it's okay. Like, the Eagles can have confidence in Jack Driscoll. The Eagles know Andre Dillard is going to be back at some point. So again, kudos to Roseman for building up the depth of this Eagles team. And yeah, I mean, I think honestly the sky's the limit for this Eagles team, and they continue to prove it week after week. There was one question I wanted to ask you too.
Yeah.
Now, again, I was at the Steelers game, so I wasn't following this game along, and it wasn't really clear to me. What was the injury issue with Jake Elliott?
Oh, all right. So Jake Elliott, I forgot to mention that. He it was towards the end of the third quarter. He essentially kicked a field goal that put him up 23-14 at that point. But a Jaguars special teamer like swept his leg, like just
Yeah, I saw
field
that on
goal
the highlight.
like
But
dive.
he
Yeah,
came back in and kicked the field goal later on that drive, I believe.
yeah, because they failed to get the touchdown on that drive. So I mean, he looked injured though, and I need to point this out that the Eagles also Nick Sirianni at the end of the game, instead of kicking the field goal, decided to
I
go
wanted
for
to
it on
ask you
fourth.
about that.
Yeah, I think the reason there might have been because of Elliott being injured. I don't know. Like I don't know what else you like.
It
That would have
must have
put the
been
game to bed.
because I was gonna say there's no reason why you should be going for that on fourth down there, unless
Yeah,
unless you just truly feel that Jake Elliott can't go out there and kick the field goal.
yeah. I mean, Jake Elliott was limping off the field after. I mean, yeah, it's actually, yeah. I don't know. I hope that's not long term either. But I mean, he's been so good for the Eagles the last couple seasons. That's just one of those things that you hate to see from one of the better kickers in the league. But I don't know. Happens, I guess. We'll see what
Yeah,
what
yeah. I
happens.
mean, and, yeah, and you certainly your kicker, you're gonna want him to be all right. But
Yeah,
um, I guess it is a good sign that he did come back in and kick a little bit later. If anything, I mean, at least it wasn't like, oh, like damn, he's down and out. But
yeah,
one other point I wanted to bring up too, because we talked about this with the defense, how it's been a different guy every week.
yeah,
It's literally been a different guy every week for this offense as well.
yep, yeah,
I mean, yeah, it was AJ Brown in week 1,
yep,
Jalen Hurts in week 2, Devontae Smith, and now Miles Sanders. Again,
yeah.
sign of a good team, a well-rounded team, or what?
I mean, I would say so. Definitely. If it's a different player each time and it's not, not solely focused on one player making all the plays, that just shows you how dangerous a team can be. I mean, how multiple and how difficult to defend, really.
Yeah, absolutely. You have anything else that you want to add on this game before we get into the week 5 preview?
Player of the game, Miles Sanders. I mean, career day. So I mean, he really helped carry this offense to a win. I mean,
Yeah.
look good as a runner. Yeah.
It's incredible too that when you're like when you think about it, down 14-0 after the first quarter, and Miles Sanders had a career day rushing the football.
Yeah.
And the Eagles, I forget how many yards you said total they rushed the football, but
Yeah. It's
usually when
200
you're down, you're passing the ball trying to get back into it.
Exactly.
But then
Yeah.
this Eagles offense just comes out and just runs all over the Jaguars. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get into the week 5 breakdowns here. I'll run through the Steelers real quick. I don't have a ton to say because this is probably the most. Well, let me give you this stat and see what you think of this. So the Steelers.
Okay.
All right, actually, I don't know if you saw the line yet. I want you to guess how many like they're underdogs in this game. How many
Yes.
point underdogs do you think they are? I don't know. Did you see the line yet?
I have not seen the line
Okay,
yet.
yeah, I want you to guess. What do you think they are underdogs in this game against the Bills?
Like
in
13. 13 points.
14-point underdogs. That was a pretty good guess.
Oh.
That was a pretty good guess. My friend that I went out to the game with, when the line came out after the game against the Jets, he guessed 9. And no, it's either 14-point underdogs. That is the
Jeez.
largest underdog of any Steelers team since like spreads became a metric that people like tracked and gambled
Oh
on.
my god.
That's the most they've ever been an underdog. It's crazy. But honestly, I don't disagree with it. I mean, 14 points, like you can make the case that the smart money is on the Bills to cover. I mean, honestly, we're not a gambling podcast or anything, but like that's how bad the Steelers team has been and where they're at right now. Now, the only reason that I'd say that I have some optimism is the fact that it's Kenny Pickett. I mean, imagine how big that spread would have been if it's Mitchell Trubisky that's still at the helm here.
Yeah.
So, again, I don't have a lot of optimism here. I think that the only way that the Steelers can even stay in the game is if they run the ball like they did in the last game. Even better than that, I mean, you got to get Najee Harris up around, 18, 19, 20-plus carries. And you got to have him rushing, again, over 75, somewhere in the 80 to 100-yard realm. And you really got to control the clock a little bit and just try to sustain drives, because if you let Josh Allen continue to get back out there, it's going to be a rough day for the Steelers defense, and they're going to put up a lot of points. I don't have a lot of confidence if they can't stop Zach Wilson and get to the quarterback against the Jets and that offensive line that was banged up, how are they going to do it against one of the best offenses in the NFL with an even more mobile quarterback in Josh Allen? So not a lot of offense, not a lot of optimism on how the Steelers are going to stop this Bills offense. And again, I think the only way you stay in the game is by keeping the ball out of his hands. But you know, Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, he even made the point. I heard him this morning saying, last year the Steelers upset the Bills in the first game of the season. This Bills team isn't going to let that happen again. They're going to come out ready to go, and they're not going to let this kind of slip. I'm not optimistic about this game whatsoever. Really, my main thing that I'm keeping an eye on is I just want Kenny Pickett to kind of hold his own. Look, we know he's going to make mistakes throughout the season. Your first game, your first start of your career, it'd be really nice if that wasn't a game where you're out there throwing multiple interceptions and you look like a rookie. If he can kind of manage the game, make some throws, operate the offense, and like I said, rely on the running game, because that's what I think they kind of got to do to stay in it. That's really what I want to see. I want to see Kenny Pickett have some semblance of success more than anything, because like I said, I'm not optimistic about the Steelers coming away with a victory here.
Yeah, I mean, they got to just keep converting first downs and just keeping the offense off the field. That's the Bills' offense off the field. That's
which they actually did a better job. You know, I actually had the stat here of the difference in the Jets game of the first and second half with who was playing quarterback and all. So in the please tell me I have it. Yeah, the Steelers. Well, this was Steelers on third down in the first half with Mitchell Trubisky. They were 1 for 6. Steelers third down in the second half were 5 for 6. So there's the difference right there between Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky running the offense. And that's what they have to do again. They have to convert third downs. They have to stay on the field. They have to continue to, you know, I'm not saying that they're going to win the time and possession battle, but you got to be pretty close to even and not far behind just to stay in it and give your defense a chance here. So that's kind of the keys to the game here of what the Steelers are going to do against the Bills. But definitely not a promising outlook in this one for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, especially when, I mean, the Bills have some injuries in their unit, so perhaps
the secondary who's been banged up last week as well. I know they had a couple of young guys in there.
Yeah, so maybe they can find a way to pick at those spots. I mean, yeah, sort of like you said, not really much optimism for the outcome of this game. As long as there are positives to take away from it, then I guess there's the silver lining.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I still want them to win.
No, yeah, I know.
I'm being realistic here, analyzing how this game's going to go.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of optimism.
Yeah, that's fair.
And the main thing it falls on is this defense. The fact of how bad, I don't want to say in the game, but especially in the fourth quarter, not being able to get pressure on Zach Wilson. It's just I'm not optimistic about what they're going to be able to do against one of the best offenses in the NFL now.
Yeah, it's going to be a handful for both units in Buffalo. So I mean, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And I don't have much more to add. So unless you do, we can move over to the Eagles here.
Yeah, so I guess we'll move on. So the Eagles at Arizona, 425.
I guess we'll move on.
Yeah.
Ricardo's sitting here like I'm betting the 17-point spread in favor of the Bills when we get off this podcast.
I mean, I'm not gonna say it out loud, but anyway. So 425 kickoff for the Eagles traveling to Arizona. I believe there's a stat that says the Eagles are 0-6 at the Cardinals. So I don't know. Take that with what you will. But this is a much different Eagles team than those other ones that have lost to Arizona in the past. So really the first thing I'm looking for is how does the Eagles defense keep Kyler Murray in the pocket and prevent him from scrambling like a child who is running away from his parents and trying to get his remote or some like gaming device like taken away from him. You know, that kind of meme stuff. Because for some reason he does that so well, but it's so funny that's how people see it. It's like a little kid.
It's interesting. It's interesting too because he actually hasn't been running as much this season as he has in years past.
Yes.
So it's certainly a level that the Eagles are going to have to game plan for, but and it's certainly the most mobile quarterback they've gone up against this season. You know, last week Trevor Lawrence, had that mantle. He's not holding it for long because now Kyler Murray is certainly a much more mobile quarterback. But yeah, that's certainly going to go into the game plan. And yeah, I mean, I guess how do you see the Eagles going about doing that?
I mean, they're gonna have to have a spy on him, like maybe TJ Edwards or White, one of those two, maybe as a spy. But definitely the edge rusher is gonna have to do a better job of setting the edge, making sure they, seal the edges off and like try and come from the outside really and make him run up the middle if he has to scramble. But that it's yeah, I think that's what they have to do. And the overall as an offense, they're like middle of the pack in just about every. I mean, they're 15th in the league, 15th. They're 15th in passing, 15th in rushing, 14th in points per game. So and I mean, the Eagles defense also leads the league with 16 sacks, fifth in pressure percentage. So really, on paper, the Eagles unit has the upper hand, and especially when you talk about the Cardinals' offensive line. I mean, it's not really that good. I mean, Will Hernandez. I mean, the left tackle, I think, is Humphreys. They're like not that good, really. I mean, in terms of player names, Eagles front line has much bigger names and better players.
And this is one of those things where I don't know what the reason is, but I am so out on the Cardinals. I've been out on them since the start of the season. I've been out on them through these first 4 weeks. They haven't shown me anything that gets me excited. I don't buy into their coach. I don't even remember what's this coach's name. It always escapes my mind.
I'm blanking on his name too.
Yeah,
I know what he looks like. I know who he is. I just am blanking on the name.
But honestly, I've been out on them. Cliff Kingsbury, of course.
Yes, Cliff. Yes.
But I've been out on them this whole time. I just don't buy into them as even being a wild card team in the NFC, and this is a weak NFC. I'm so low on the Cardinals. That being said, the Eagles traveling out to Arizona on the road. I still think that they're going to get the win. I still like the Eagles in this game. I think it's going to be a challenge for them because, this offense can still put up points, but it's a game that I still think that the Eagles should be able to find a way to win.
They should, yeah. I mean, we'll talk about the offensive side of it too. I mean, offense versus defense. I mean, obviously, will Jalen Hurts rebound after his rather poor showing compared to other games that he's had this season? Cardinals defense is 23rd against the pass. I mean, they're really good against the run. They're 6th, but they're last in sacks. They only have 4 on the season. 28th in points per game allowed, 25.8. So, I mean, and the Eagles' offense is 6th in passing, 5th in rushing. Like, in theory, both units for the Eagles have the upper hand, so they should win this game. But because in Arizona's on the road, this gives a bit of trap game vibes, sort of, where it's like, oh, you're running so high, but then all of a sudden,
trap game end the following week are going up against division rival Dallas Cowboys in what could potentially be Dak Prescott's first game back from the injury. So I think a trap game is kind of a good way to put it. But again, I think it's a team that the Eagles are superior to, and I think that they should still find a way to get the win. And I think you're in agreement with that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the Cardinals only had 3 points in the first half against the Panthers. The Panthers aren't good. They suck.
Yeah, no, they're not good. They're not good, and Matt Rhule's probably going to be
first half against the Raiders, they scored less than 10 points, and then it came back and won somehow miraculously in that game in OT after Hunter Renfrow forgot to keep his hand on the ball. But
if they can just keep Kyler Murray somewhat subdued, they should be okay.
Yes,
like they're going to be able to put up points. They're going to be able to pass the ball downfield against the Cardinals. It's just a matter of not letting Kyler Murray kind of explode and have a big day. Not just running the ball, but throwing it too, because we know he's a pretty dynamic player at the quarterback position. If they can just relatively hone him in, I think they'll be all right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really that scared of this Cardinals team at all. It's more the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles are favored to win this. I forget what the line is, but it's their game to lose, essentially.
Yeah, and I think that going forward, they're going to be favored, obviously, in the majority of these games. So, as they should, undefeated and looking like one of the favorites in the NFC. So,
yeah.
Do you have anything else that you want to touch on? Any final thoughts before we wrap things up here?
It feels a bit unusual being undefeated at this point. I think if they go 5-0, it's like, Yeah, and being 5-0, if they are like, yeah, do win on Sunday, I read something on Bleeding Green Nation where it was like it'd be the first time since like early 2000s or something that they've gone undefeated in their first 5 games. So I mean, yeah, take that what you will, but it's an exciting time for the Eagles, and I mean, building blocks for the Steelers. I mean, yeah, I don't know, very
Building blocks for the
different.
Steelers. You know, that's something that even kind of got me a little bit down, which I didn't even know this, but supposedly in a post-game interview, Deontay Johnson kind of alluded to the fact or made some comment that this is like a little bit of a rebuilding season for the Steelers, which it is. And I don't think
Yeah,
anybody's really hiding that fact, but it sucks to hear that from a player. To hear a
yeah,
player say, hey, we recognize we're rebuilding a little bit. When this division really is still within reach at this point, if you can find ways to win games.
yeah,
Um, I really hope Mike Tomlin can kind of whoop that out of these guys and get them back into the mindset of, hey, we could still win games and compete for a wild card here, even though they have a really tough schedule going forward.
yeah, yeah,
You know, I don't like that doubt because a comment like that tells me this team, guys on this team see the flaws and they see this schedule that's coming up and they know that there's superior teams in the back of their mind. And it really sucks to hear them comment on that. So
yeah,
I don't know. Something to keep an eye on. You know, I can't watch every single interview, but I just heard someone make reference to that. I think even on that might have been Mike Florio again this morning on Pro Football Talk. But
yeah.
that being said, that's all I've got. Ricardo, anything else?
Nah, that's all I got too, man.
It's another episode, man. Another one under our belt, and you know, very possible we could be sitting in the same shoes next week with the Eagles
Yeah,
another win and the Steelers another loss. But hey, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Maybe the Steelers will pull something out of their bag of tricks. Mike Tomlin will find something, some way to motivate this team, get the best out of them. Najee Harris, maybe a career day, who knows? And the Eagles, let's see if they can go into Arizona, take care of business, steal the video game controller from Kyler Murray, and not let him get it back. We will see. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Take care. Bye-bye now. Have a good one.